Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, global warming alert. Hell must have frozen over. A Republican elected governor of Maryland. 6th District congressional race. Delaney holds on to congressional seat by slim margin over Bongino, and Leggett wins for a third term. Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by political consultant Steve Kreseski, education activist Cynthia Rubenstein, political consultant Susan Heltemes, and former state senator Jean Roesser. Stay tuned for more in a minute. The fact that the midterm election held November 4th was a historical national election as the Republican Party picked up a minimum of 7 Senate seats, assuring Republicans control of both houses of Congress for the first time since 2006. Locally, a single statement: a Republican who never held elective office was elected governor of Maryland, can sum up the political seismic shift here in the state of Maryland. As described by the Baltimore Sun, Republican Larry Hogan's victory in Maryland's governor race was a stunning political upset. Steve, as Governor Ehrlich's first chief of staff, you would have been up close and personal in an equally historic election. The Baltimore Sun attributes Hogan's victory to the personal appeal of Mr. Hogan, an election year where voters were clearly fed up with those in power, and finally, a poor showing by the Lieutenant Governor, Anthony Brown. The implication being that Hogan didn't so much win as Brown lost. What do you think?
Casey, I agree with the Sun's overall characterization. I think that to some extent your point is correct in that Democrats have over a 2-to-1 advantage against Republicans. And so in a normal year, one would think sheer numbers would overwhelm Larry Hogan. But Larry Hogan had a laser-focused message. And he stayed on that message, and he understood where Marylanders were, and it was all the economic issues: taxes, ability to find good jobs, housing, everything else. And the lieutenant governor was caught up in an old playbook, and he also was not freed up because he's a wonderfully engaging person. He's very intelligent, but his handlers did not let him really bond with Democratic voters. So it was an underperformance by Democratic voters, and a lot of enthusiasm by Republicans and independents.
Thanks, Steve. Senator Roesser, the Baltimore Sun also summed up its editorial analysis by stating Democrats may dominate Maryland politics, but their success is clearly not inevitable. Given the facts that the Democrats ran away with the other statewide offices, comptroller and attorney general, is Hogan's election a fluke or the result of what Steve just analyzed?
Well, I agree with Steve, and I also want to say that Hogan's message connected with the voters. He turned it into a really competitive race, and I keep going back to that early statement of Anthony Brown before the primary that he would take this little molehill of Republicans. And that charged me for one thing, but he stayed on message. He had a strategic long-term plan. He not only connected with the voters, but he reached out to the voters. He was accessible. And he really did. There was just something happened a few weeks before, but where the Republicans really got charged up, including me. And it was a great campaign, a textbook campaign.
Susan, when Kathleen Kennedy Townsend lost her race to Bob Ehrlich, there were those that attributed the defeat to Miss Townsend being a weak candidate. Was Anthony Brown a weak candidate, or was he just running a bad election cycle?
Well, first of all, Casey, I'm an honorable woman. We had a $5 bet.
I
I
can't accept this on the air, Susan.
Yeah, there you are.
Thank you very much.
I agree a bit with what Steve said. Anthony Brown was a good candidate. I think he was ill-served by his handlers and his campaign. I don't think they were let Anthony be Anthony. And Hogan's message was, let's cut taxes. And Brown did not respond the way he should have. Maryland has been leading Virginia for years on job creation. There's a lot of good things going on here. They never talked about what happened the last time a Republican was governor. It wasn't so great, but he didn't talk about it. And if you look at the turnout, blacks did not turn out in Baltimore and Prince George's. Montgomery County Democrats did not turn out, and there are a variety of reasons which we can talk about later. And across the nation, 2/3 of the voters stay home. I don't know the exact counts yet in Maryland. And what I find most interesting, and I'm looking for this number, 75% of the voters nationwide were white. And if you look at the record across the state, our minorities did not come out to vote. And it helped Hogan, who had a laser message and did a great job. And I wish him and Boyd Rutherford the very best.
All right, we'll get back to, I got a question for you, but I want to go to Cynthia first. There are those that suggest, Cynthia, that the Lieutenant Governor didn't define himself. Would a different candidate like Heather Mazur have done better?
Well, Heather Mazur did well in defining herself during the primary and didn't win. But more importantly, what Anthony Brown did not do and should have done was make his message positive. He went intensely negative, and he went intensely negative against Hogan on all the wrong issues that have already been settled and found no traction with the voters. Instead of putting forth a positive message and an identifying message of what Anthony Brown was specifically going to do.
Not only that, he changed the message. He actually tried to preempt, I believe, Hogan's message about the economy.
And Casey,
But
can I
very
just-
late.
just make
And he
one-
couldn't run
Very
away
late.
from the governor
Go ahead.
on that.
Very quickly, in a conversation with Anthony Brown, Lieutenant Governor, several years ago at the Orioles game, I asked him about why he had changed some of his mandate with regard to what he was doing for the state, particularly the base realignment activities. He had moved from that to the social issues. And he told me that as a military man, most of his life, he understood that he answered to his governor. And I think that was the problem with this race. Lieutenant Governor at some point has to really escape from the legacy of the current governor. Puts it in an awkward situation, but if you don't do that early, you get branded by the current governor. There
And
was
all the
serious
lieutenant
O'Malley
governors
fatigue.
have lost. I mean, a lieutenant governor has not pulled through before, and there is that.
Does Anthony Brown have a political career in Maryland now that he's lost?
I don't think it's
I think
over.
it's too early to say.
It is too early.
It's too early
I
to
think
say.
the biggest loser on Tuesday was Martin O'Malley, because for Martin O'Malley to take the national scene, he had to have his agenda wholeheartedly endorsed, and that meant Anthony Brown had to win.
Do you think anybody in Iowa or New
Absolutely.
Hampshire is going to
Yes,
be
and you know why?
concerned about that?
When I was in Minnesota, I attended a dinner that Mr. O'Malley spoke at, and yes, his message is based on what he was able to do in in Maryland. And yes, people will be looking at that closely as we go to 2016.
And this became a national headline news.
Yes.
This upset.
Well, of course it did. I mean, Maryland is the bluest of blue.
Right.
Yes.
Of
And
course
I
it's
think
gonna-
that
And if he
will
couldn't
reflect on
carry it
O'Malley.
on, I think it shows great weakness. And I think he is going to be in real trouble. You aren't going to be able to introduce him the way he was introduced in Minnesota based on this loss. He is a tainted person now. And it'll be interesting to see if he can reinvigorate himself, but I think he's in trouble.
Steve, what do you think about Anthony Brown? Does he have a future politically?
I think absolutely. He's very talented. I think, though, that
And he has a great story.
if I may finish, I think he has to do some mending the fences with his base in the party, because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be very upset by his loss, because it probably should not have happened.
And there were two leaders who were lukewarm in their endorsements and really did not help him a lot, and that's Rusher and Baker and Stephanie Rawlings Blake
And
in
Doug
Baltimore.
Gansler did nothing.
All right, so we're going to wrap this up. Next week, we're going to discuss whether or not Larry Hogan can govern in the state of Maryland. Stay tuned for more when we come back from this short break.
Oh,
And welcome back. In the heavily gerrymandered 6th Congressional District, Congressman John Delaney defeated Republican challenger Dan Bongino by a mere 2,300 votes. Susan, is there any significance in the closeness of this election?
Well, in his district, I believe with the exception of Montgomery County, Larry Hogan carried everything. So those votes coming out, I have not seen the actual count yet. I'm going to wait till they're finalized. But that enthusiasm for Hogan, based on a much lower vote count in Montgomery County than anybody would have liked, meant trouble for him. But John Delaney is here to stay. If he can win this year, he can win anytime. And John Delaney's future is very bright in Maryland and within the Democratic Party.
But doesn't it also reinforce the idea that the people in Western Maryland are not represented?
I think that the people in
You've got more votes in Montgomery County.
But the
than you do
people in
Western
Maryland, like, if they're a more conservative ilk, John Delaney is a conservative person, and if you'll look at what he's dealt with on Congress, he has focused on business and agriculture,
Right.
Western Maryland.
This is a short topic, Susan. We aren't going to let you... Hold on, I got to go to the Senator Roesser. Bongino has run twice now for office in Maryland. Is his political career over here?
First, I just want to say this is a classic example, as you alluded to gerrymandering. If it had been anywhere near the previous congressional district, but Bongino would have won. He ran a close race, like he won by 1 or 2. He lost by 1 or 2% of the vote. I certainly do think he has a bright future. He's a very talented guy, and he.
But
Wait a minute, I want to ask Steve.
Anybody that comes that close.
But this plays into
one day
a topic that I was asked on election night, which is why don't the Republicans have a bench that can win an election? They can win at that top of the ticket, but all the statewide elections they weren't able to do.
they do have a bench, but it really comes down to money, organization, infrastructure, and when you're running against an incumbent. I think I agree with Senator Roesser that there's definitely a bright future for Dan Bongino. He was vastly underfunded. He ran a positive message. Delaney ran, I think, an insincere message that he's an independent voter, where he votes with the Democratic leadership 95 to 98% of the time.
That sounds like the typical Republican.
And basically, by running as if he was something new, he got some votes that he probably wouldn't have got otherwise.
The Republicans picked up seats in this election. They picked up 7 seats in the House of Delegates and about 2 seats in the state Senate. So there is a farm team forming there for future elections. I think that's very, very important. That those people, they're talented, they were good candidates,
and I
they
think
won,
the one thing that Republicans have going for them, which I was shocked at, and the biggest shock of all, was that Howard County not only now has a Republican county executive, but that Brown Almond lost it.
Just remember, you have the Kittlemans. They, in my opinion, reigned supreme in Howard County. Alan Kittleman became county executive.
That's what I just
He's
said,
got a
yes.
terrific future. Trent Kittleman became a delegate. Former delegate Bob Flanagan won. Boyd Rutherford is from Howard County. There is a farm team in Howard County.
I'm glad you proved that, Gene. Now we're going to go on to our last topic, which is our local races. Cynthia, County Executive Ike Leggett won re-election for his 3rd term. Does this refute the idea that voters were angry about those who were in power?
Well, I think what it shows is that Ike Leggett won the election in June. And it also made for a very lackluster atmosphere for voters in Montgomery County because there were no big, important conflicts, contested races, not on the county council level, not on the county exec level. not really on the school board level, certainly not the judges. So it was another reason that I think that voter turnout was depressed.
Steve, locally in Montgomery County, Democrats overwhelmingly won the election. As Cynthia suggested, it was over in June after the primary. So what lesson do Republicans take from Hogan's victory that they can apply to put a viable Republican Party here in the county?
I think what really has happened is the state Republican Party has become re-energized and can raise money. You have a Republican governor, and the Republican governor will, in theory, run for re-election. And that will be strong coattails and planned coattails with a wide swath of viable candidates that, like Larry Hogan, will know where people's hearts are with regard to messaging. And so there are several places, like Jean's old seat, that are potentially in play and should be contested.
I think that Cynthia touched on something here, though. District 18 and 20 are where the Democrats are in this county. In 18, the delegates and the senator didn't even have an opponent. In 20, Jamie Raskin, the senator, didn't have an opponent, and there was a nominal Green Party. And Chris Van Hollen's race was closer this time than it's ever been. But everybody thought, well, Chris is okay. When Brian Frosch got through and he energized a lot of people, everybody knew Brian's going to be the Attorney General. And Democrats stayed home in Montgomery County. And if Democrats had come out in Montgomery County, things would have been very different. And I've been in conversations.
You won all the races. How would they be any different?
No, in the governor's race, if they had come out, there was so much complacency because, oh, well.
But let's talk. I want to talk about Montgomery County and the future of Montgomery County, because that's what we're concentrating on week in and week out. Is it healthy to have a one-party system?
No.
That sets policy? And frankly, Cynthia, the school board elections are a huge problem. You've got those members of the school board who spend 55% of your budget and have very little aren't being supervised. Thank you.
Yeah.
By the county council and the county executive.
Yeah.
Which is every year very frustrating for the county executive and the county council.
And this year, the MCEA won 3 out of 4 seats. 3 of their 4 people got endorsed.
The only seat they did not take was the seat that was open, that was being vacated by Shirley Brandon.
So is it the fact that the citizens just don't realize how important that down ballot race is to the decisions being made in Montgomery County?
I would say yes. I think there's so much focus on the top races and so little knowledge about the Board of Education in particular. And there were some excellent candidates. I frankly was surprised that some of the challengers didn't. But for instance, Pat O'Neill has been in there forever. There was a very good candidate running against her, and she just swept it. So
what I found interesting in the campaign was that for the first time in my memory, the Gazette came out, and as well as the Washington Post, and made very precise and I think well-considered endorsements of some Republican candidates, which I've not seen before. Which was interesting, the way that they were stirring the pot a little bit for the electorate.
But you know what, Cynthia,
Stir
the
the pot a
power
little bit.
of the Democratic voters and the Democratic sample ballot came through, though, and you alluded to it with the judges. The 4 judges were on, the incumbents were on the Democratic sample ballot, and they all swept through. And they were supposed to be on the Republican one also because the deal had made, but supposedly the challenger upset the Republican. There was some issue, so they weren't on. But the Democratic sample ballot pulled through the sitting judges when there was a concern for a time that.
And it wasn't close.
No, it was not close at all.
I was very surprised at that.
So are we going to see anything different out of this county council and county executive than we have the last few
They're
years?
already scrambling. Meetings are taking place about what does Governor Hogan mean, and I have heard that Ike Leggett is going to be the new head of MACO, and he's going to have his hands full. And so the council, they've already pretty much said, we know that social issues aren't going to be a big priority in the next 4 years.
But they already know what their big issues are. One of them is school construction funding, and another one is the Purple Line, which is has a tenuous position with the governor-elect.
And you're going to have,
If I could just add, the really hot issue is going to be funding teachers' pension and the state's portion of education funding. Larry Hogan will be true to Montgomery County, and school construction will stay on the right path. That's dedicated and that's
You heard it
bonded.
here.
you need to come back next week, because that's what we're going to talk about next week. We're going to talk all about the nuts and bolts. All right, stay tuned for parting shots.
Good question.
And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Cynthia Rubenstein.
I spent Election Day not obsessing about politics. In fact, I did not come close to a precinct. I voted early. I spent my day with Youth Leadership Montgomery and 3 of Passion for Learning students who were learning about leadership and philanthropy. And they learned about some wonderful organizations, including Poder in Gaithersburg, which is increasing the graduation rate of Hispanic males. Family Services, which has a program for teen mothers, and of course Passion for Learning with 3 of my own students who talked about our Go to College camp and their experiences with Passion for Learning. We had 3 kids. One of them is a budding photojournalist, another one wants to be a psychotherapist, and third, an engineer.
Terrific, Cynthia. Good for you. Susan, your parting shot.
I think the Democrats across the nation went off message this year and lost. And the reason being is if they had stuck to basic things like the need to raise the minimum wage, which John Boehner will not bring to the floor, 4 states, Alaska, Arkansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota, not exactly what I would call liberal states, all pass minimum wages. So Democrats, you need to go back to the basics and you're going to win again.
And all elected. Jean Roesser, your parting shot.
I want to thank all the candidates, winners and losers, who put themselves on the line and ran for office. They are to be commended for the effort that they made, and it's a rich experience no matter winners and losers both, and also the volunteers who work so hard and so long for the candidates. Quickly, I want to mention a wonderful dedication last Saturday of the Scotland Community Center in Potomac. This is the fruition of a decades-long effort by a Scotland resident named Betty Thompson. And it was a wonderful ribbon-cutting ceremony. Susan was there. In fact, her cousin was the project manager, right, for the building. So it was a very happy day for the residents of Scotland and the youth, particularly in that community.
Thank you, Jean. Steve Kreseski, wrap it up.
I'd like to take the additional part of Jean Roesser's comments, and I'd like to thank all those that took the time to vote, with early voting, absentee, and certainly going in person. But I'd like to point out a little fact. Not everyone's happy with the results, particularly at the statewide level. And for those that voted, thank you, but you only represent 39% of registered voters. And not all adults in Maryland are even registered. So in effect, all those people that took the time to vote and study the candidates, they actually had 3 votes because you gave them the proxy if you did not participate. So don't be a complainer. I think everyone should be optimist. There will be change with new candidates. Let's all pitch in and make the state stronger.
Thank you, everybody. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You know, we talk politics week in and week out, and it's the elections that really make it worthwhile because that's the time we get to see change happening in our community. I want to thank the viewers for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County hardest hitting political talk show. And remember, you can follow us on Twitter, but I hate tweeting. It's really, I don't get it. So you better to like us on Facebook and watch us on YouTube. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.